My name is Beatrice, and for the past 4 years, I have been working as a senior project manager at a company. Unlike many of my colleagues, who complain about tight schedules and demanding clients, I thrive under this pressure. There is something deeply satisfying about seeing a project through to the end, from the initial sketches and blueprints to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. That sense of control, of completion, it is one of the few constants in my life. My apartment in the city center is small, but it is mine. Or at least, it will be once I finish paying off the mortgage. The balcony overlooks the river, and on clear days, I can see a mountain on the horizon, its silhouette appearing almost unreal against the sky. Sometimes, on weekends, I sit on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the light move across the water, but those moments are rare. This Friday evening, I was enjoying one of them. Dark ruby Pinot Noir shimmered in my glass, and a light breeze played with strands of my hair. The work week had been long but had gone smoothly, and I allowed myself to relax a little. I took a sip of wine when my phone rang. Glancing at the screen, I saw that it was my mother calling. "Hi, Mom," I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I poured myself a little more wine. "Beatrice." My mother's voice had that artificial cheerfulness I knew all too well. It always appeared when she needed something. "Listen, your father and I are hosting a family dinner next Saturday. Everyone will be there, and we need you to come too." I felt the corners of my lips twitch into a smile. "Mom, is this an attempt to lure me in under the pretense of your legendary lasagna?" She laughed. "Of course not, but, yes, I will make your favorite, the one with 3 cheeses and homemade sauce." I couldn't say no. "All right. I'll be there." After we hung up, I stepped back onto the balcony. It had been months since I had last seen my parents. My 60-hour workweek left little time for frequent visits, and their packed schedules, filled with golf, community theater, and social gatherings, only made it harder. We mostly saw each other on holidays, and next Saturday's dinner was a chance to catch up. I was also curious to see my younger siblings, Geronimo and Ines. The twins were 12 years younger than me, and at 24, they were still trying to find their place in life. I remembered that at their age, I was already working, paying rent, and saving up to buy my apartment. Their path had been much smoother. By the time I moved out at 18, they were still being tucked into bed. Now, they each had their own apartments, with rent partially covered by our parents. Geronimo had switched majors 3 times in college before settling on communications, while Ines had recently quit her barista job because her manager was completely toxic. The following Saturday, I pulled up to my parents' house right at 4 o'clock. Ines's bright blue Kia and Geronimo's motorcycle were already parked outside. Perfect. I was the last to arrive. That meant they had probably been talking about me. As I walked up the pathway, I heard laughter from inside the house. It abruptly stopped when I rang the doorbell. Mom answered, still wearing her apron, with a smile that seemed just a little forced. "Beatrice." Come in," she said, giving me a quick hug. I caught the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with the aroma of garlic. In the living room, the twins were sitting on the couch, their heads tilted toward each other conspiratorially. When I walked in, they exchanged quick glances. Well, look who finally showed up," Geronimo drawled with a smirk. "Shush," Ines hissed at him but smiled as well. "Hey," she said, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger. "Nice suit." "Straight from work." It was Saturday, but I didn't bother correcting her. "Hi, Ines." "Geronimo." I nodded at my brother, who gave a hesitant wave without bothering to get up from the couch. They exchanged another glance, quick, almost imperceptible, but I caught something hidden in it. A flicker of unease stirred in the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to start overanalyzing everything related to my family again. I made my way to the dining room, where Mom was setting the table with the china we only used for the most important holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Wow, breaking out the fancy stuff. You're clearly trying to impress someone, I remarked, picking up a porcelain plate. Is this some sort of special family gathering? Mom and Dad exchanged a quick glance, and my unease deepened. I pressed my lips together, preparing to ask the next question, but before I could, the twins strolled casually into the dining room and took their usual seats across from me. Throughout dinner, the conversation remained painfully superficial. Mom was enthusiastically talking about her gardening club, praising a new variety of roses that her neighbor had recommended. Dad mentioned the golf club he was planning to join, going into great detail about why it was a strategically sound choice. The twins, chatting between themselves, exchanged gossip about people I didn't even know. No one asked me about my job, about how I was handling my new projects, about whether there was someone in my life. And while silence had always been a familiar companion at our family gatherings, today it felt different. It was filled with something unspoken, something tense, and with every bite of lasagna, I felt that tension growing. The lasagna, of course, was excellent. Mom hadn't lied. The rich flavor of 3 cheeses, the sauce-soaked pasta layers, the perfectly balanced spices. I would have loved to enjoy the meal, but something kept me from doing so. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she placed dessert in front of me, homemade tiramisu, another one of my favorite treats. I set down my fork and looked at my parents intently. "All right," I said, breaking the silence. "What's going on?" Mom flinched as if I had caught her off guard, and Dad cleared his throat, setting his napkin aside. "Beatrice," he began, choosing his words carefully, "your mother and I are getting older, and lately, we've been thinking a lot about the future." Mom picked up where he left off with that forced eagerness that always gave her away in moments of discomfort. "We've decided to finalize our will, and we wanted to tell you in person." I nodded, still not quite understanding where this conversation was headed. "All right." Dad cleared his throat again, avoiding my gaze. "We've decided," he continued, "that the house and the lake cottage will go to Geronimo and Ines." Silence filled the room. I stared at him, waiting for him to continue, but he didn't. "And?" I prompted, motioning for him to go on. Mom pressed her lips together nervously. "That's it, dear," she finally said, her voice oddly defensive. "You have to understand, you're doing so well financially, and the twins are still finding their way. They need security more than you do." I slowly shifted my gaze from my parents to my siblings. Ines was calmly poking at her tiramisu with a spoon, while Geronimo barely hid his smug smile. "Just to be clear," he drawled, leaning forward, "we wanted you to know in advance, so there wouldn't be any confusion later." I felt something inside me tighten. Everything. The house I had helped pay for, sending my parents money for the mortgage over the past 4 years. The lake cottage, whose renovations I had covered to the tune of $30,000 last summer. Mom blushed, staring at her plate. "That doesn't matter, Beatrice," she said, trying to inject warmth into her voice. "Family helps family. You know that." I let out a slow breath, fighting off the sensation of having been punched in the stomach. "Yes, family helps family," I echoed, feeling a cold calm settle over me. "Like when I paid for their college tuition. Or when I sent you $600 every month to cover household expenses." My parents looked away. "Oh, don't be so self-righteous," Ines scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love us more." I blinked, not immediately processing what I had just heard. "Excuse me?" Geronimo smirked. "It's true," he added, leaning back in his chair. "You've always resented us. Because you had to babysit while we got to have fun." He shrugged. "It's not our fault you were born first." I looked at my parents, expecting them to step in. to say something in my defense, to refute the ridiculous accusations Ines and Geronimo were throwing in my face. But Mom only pressed her lips together, her face going rigid, as if carved from stone. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Beatrice," Mom said, her voice filled with reproach, as if I were the one being cruel. "Bringing up money at a family dinner. You've always been obsessed with counting every penny." I opened my mouth, but the words got stuck in my throat. "While your brother and sister are doing their best to find good jobs in this economy," Mom continued, "you should be supporting them, not envying them." I swallowed, feeling anger rise in my chest. Whose fault is it that they can't hold down a job? I snapped. Maybe it's because they've never had to work for anything in their lives. "See?" Ines drawled, crossing her arms over her chest. "Jealous and greedy." Something inside me cracked. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "What I see," I said, my voice steady, "is that I've been financially supporting this family for years, getting nothing in return but criticism. And now, it turns out I've just been written out of the will. For what? For being responsible." Dad suddenly stood up, his face darkening. "I think you should leave, Beatrice," he said coldly. "When you calm down and can discuss this rationally, we'll talk again." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. I needed to calm down. I stayed silent as I put on my coat, feeling the air in the room grow heavier with an icy silence. Geronimo and Ines lounged in their seats, smirking at me from across the table. "Don't let the door hit you on your way out," Geronimo called after me. "This is our house now, not yours." I walked out without looking back. The drive home was a blur. All I could think about was how blind I'd been. All these years. The steering wheel felt foreign in my hands. I was gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white, barely registering the road ahead. By some miracle, I made it back to my apartment without incident. As soon as the door clicked shut behind me, I exhaled. "You're such an idiot, Beatrice," I muttered under my breath, kicking off my shoes in the entryway. A complete and utter fool. I walked straight to the wine rack in the living room. My fingers brushed over the bottles. The cheap wine I usually used for cooking? No. I needed something else. I picked out an expensive Cabernet, the one I had been saving for a special occasion. Well, finding out your family has been using you as an ATM seemed like a special enough occasion. I poured myself a generous glass of dark ruby red wine and made my way to the living room, but the memories hit before I even sat down. All the times I had helped them. 3 years ago, Geronimo wrecked his first car. Dad was furious, but of course, it all came down to how the poor boy needed a reliable vehicle for school. $5,000 for the down payment on a new one. A year ago, Ines decided she wanted to become a yoga instructor. "It's my calling," she had said, brimming with enthusiasm. She didn't have the money for certification, but she had me. Another $2,500. And the lake cottage? Last summer, a pipe burst and flooded the first floor. My parents had called me in a panic, begging for help. Another $30,000 for repairs. The irony was, in all these years, I had used that cottage exactly twice. But the worst part wasn't even that. The biggest expenses were the ones I covered every month. 4 years ago, my parents decided to move into a bigger house, but their retirement income wasn't enough to cover the mortgage. They took out a loan, and shortly after my promotion, they asked if I could help with the payments. Since then, I have been sending them $1,800 every month, plus an extra $600 for utilities and property taxes. I took a sip of wine and stared into the distance. $2,400 a month, I murmured, doing the math in my head. For 4 years. The number flashed before my eyes. $115,000. $115,000. That's how much I had given my family. And now they were telling me I wasn't getting anything because I was doing well financially anyway. The truth was, I didn't even care about inheriting their house or the cottage. What stung wasn't the decision itself, it was how dismissively it had been announced. As if my contributions had meant nothing. As if I had meant nothing. And using my favorite food as a bribe, what was that, if not manipulation? I opened my banking app and stared at the scheduled transfers. $1,800 to Mom and Dad for the mortgage, another payment set for the 15th. $600 for their bills and household expenses, due to be withdrawn on the 1st of every month. I took a deep breath. Cancelled both recurring payments. Turned off my phone. Finished my wine. And went to bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I didn't have to worry about a huge portion of my paycheck going towards someone else's expenses. I could finally start saving for my own future. I spent the next 2 weeks completely immersed in work. Stayed late at the office, brought projects home on the weekends, signed new contracts. My phone remained blissfully silent. No calls. No messages. As if my family had never existed. And then, exactly 14 days after that disastrous dinner, a message from Mom appeared. Beatrice, don't forget, the mortgage payment is due today, and we need money for household expenses by Friday. The electricity bill is higher this month. I stared at the screen. Was she serious? After everything that had happened, she still expected me to send money? As if cutting me out of the will and insulting me to my face had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience, not even worth discussing. I typed my reply. I will no longer be paying the mortgage or the bills. I am not going to financially support a house that, as you've made very clear, has nothing to do with me. Please make other arrangements. I hit send. Placed my phone on the table. My heart was pounding. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. How dare you, she shrieked, not even bothering with a greeting. Somewhere in the background, something clattered. Maybe she had jumped up from the table or slammed a cup down. You can't just stop paying, she went on, not giving me a chance to respond. Without warning. What are we supposed to do now? I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and said in an even voice. Hello to you too, Mom. She fell silent, but I could practically see her face turning red with anger. And by the way, I added, I am warning you right now, I will not be paying anymore. You can't do this to us, she exploded. We're your parents. You have obligations. I let out a cold laugh. Actually, no, I interrupted. A tense silence stretched across the line. I helped voluntarily, I continued. Because I thought we were a family that supported each other. But after learning that you and Dad are leaving everything to Geronimo and Ines, I realized how unfair this is to me. This is about the will. Mom cried, her voice shaking. I knew you'd fixate on the money. You're just greedy and jealous. Anger flared up inside me again. No, Mom, I said slowly, measuring each word. This is about respect. I took a breath and went on. I spent years helping all of you financially. And in return, I was cut out of the will and humiliated at a family dinner. I will not be the family's piggy bank anymore. Before she could say anything else, I ended the call. My hands were shaking. I hadn't even set my phone down before it started ringing again. Mom. A minute later, Dad. Then Geronimo. Then Ines. I declined them all. A few minutes later, the messages started coming in. From Mom, Beatrice, please. You don't want us to lose the house. From Dad, we can't pay the mortgage without you. This is your duty to the family. From Geronimo, you're so selfish. From Ines, Mom is crying because of you. Hope you sleep well, you snake. I clenched my phone, resisting the urge to throw it against the wall. They weren't even trying to understand my side. I had spent $115,000 on their bills, their mortgage, their comfort. And now, the moment I finally said no, they treated me as if I had betrayed them. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. I blocked all 4 of their numbers. Set my phone down on the nightstand. Poured myself another glass of wine. As I gazed out the window at the shimmering lights of the city, I felt something strange, almost unfamiliar. Peace. For the first time in years, I felt free. A week later, my phone started blowing up with calls from relatives. At first, I ignored them. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Aunt Agatha. Cousin Gasper. Even Uncle Luis, my father's brother, who had been living in Arizona and hadn't called me since I graduated college. Clearly, my mother had been busy spreading her version of events. Your mother says you're trying to make them homeless, Aunt Agatha said when I finally answered. There was caution in her voice. What's going on, dear? I took a deep breath. Aunt Agatha, they haven't paid a cent on that house in 4 years. Silence. What? She asked, sounding genuinely confused. But your mother told everyone you just helped with the down payment. No, I said, sharper than I intended. I've been covering the mortgage payments since they bought the house. Plus the utility bills. You can ask them yourself. Conversations with other relatives followed the same pattern. Some took my side. Some took my parents'. Some refused to believe I had been financing them all these years, insisting I was lying to make myself look better. I was tired of the whispers and accusations. So I opened Facebook and made a post. In detail. I wrote about how I had been paying the mortgage and bills for 4 years. About how I found out I'd been cut out of the will. About how I was insulted at a family dinner and yet was still expected to keep paying. I ended with, I love my family, but I can't continue subsidizing their lifestyle while being treated like an outsider. It's time I prioritize my own future. The post got dozens of supportive comments, but also plenty of criticism. Some relatives thought I was wrong for making family matters public. Others insisted I should keep paying the mortgage regardless of the will because they're still your parents. A month passed with no contact from my family. I started to think that maybe, finally, they had accepted my decision. Work was as busy as ever, but now, I was enjoying my financial freedom. I was no longer supporting 4 adults. I even put down a deposit on that trip to Italy I had been dreaming about for years. But in my family, peace never lasts long. It was a Tuesday when I was assigned to oversee a project in Sacramento. The company had just completed a medical office building, and they needed someone to conduct final inspections and walk the clients through the facility. Just 3 days, my boss assured me. You fly out Wednesday morning, back by Friday night. I packed light, just a carry-on with essentials and my laptop. The trip went smoothly. The client was thrilled with the building. The inspections went well, only minor issues. I even had time to enjoy dinner at a cozy little restaurant recommended by the hotel concierge. By Friday afternoon, I was already on my flight home, feeling accomplished and looking forward to a relaxing weekend. But as soon as I stepped into my building around 8 in the evening, I knew something was wrong. As I approached my apartment door, a knot tightened in my stomach. The entire doorframe was covered in expanding foam. A thick, solid mass filled the space between the door and the frame, sealing the entrance shut. I set my suitcase down and cautiously touched it with my finger. It had completely hardened. What the hell? I muttered. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone wanted to make sure I couldn't get inside. I clenched my jaw, pulled out my phone, and took several pictures to document the damage. Then, taking a deep breath to steady myself, I called the building management office. Building management, good evening. This is Beatrice Marlowe from apartment 1708. I tried to keep my voice even, but the tension still bled through. Someone has sealed my doors shut with construction foam. I can't get inside. I need emergency maintenance. Wait, what? The dispatcher's voice wavered. Your door is covered in foam, I repeated. It's hardened. The lock won't work. Oh, okay, that's serious. We'll send a technician right away. I thanked him and hung up. Then, without hesitating, I opened my camera and started recording. Friday, 8 p.m. I just got back from a business trip, and this is what I found. I panned the camera over my door, slowly capturing every detail. Someone has filled the entire doorframe with construction foam, deliberately blocking my entrance. I stopped the recording and frowned. Who would do this? The answer was obvious. Half an hour later, the technician arrived. Well, damn, he muttered, inspecting the door. Someone had a good time with this. Yeah, I said dryly. He shook his head, pulled out a knife, and began carefully cutting away the hardened foam. While he worked, I checked my phone. No new messages from my family. So if it was them, they weren't bragging about it. Or, they were waiting for me to reach out first. All done, the technician said, straightening up. I replaced the lock. You'll need new keys. Thanks. I stepped inside, shut the door, and immediately engaged the second lock. Then, pulling out my phone, I opened the family group chat. For weeks, the chat had been filled with accusations, complaints, and demands. But this time, I sent my own message. I don't know which one of you was pathetic enough to seal my door shut, but just so you know, I called maintenance, the lock has been changed, and the footage has been sent to both building management and the police. If anyone comes near my home again, we'll be talking through lawyers. I hit send. Then I blocked the chat. And finally, I exhaled. The next morning, I got a call from building management. Ms. Marlowe, we reviewed the security footage. We think you should come to the office. I grabbed my keys and left. The video was clear. On the screen, beneath the grainy gray shadows of the parking lot, a figure appeared. I tensed. Tall. Wearing a hoodie, the hood pulled up, but the walk. The way they moved. No. It couldn't be. The person walked up to the building entrance and entered a code. A code. Only residents and people I trusted knew that code. They slipped inside. Next frame, elevator. My floor. The hallway camera, pointing toward my apartment. The person pulled something from their bag. Foam. My fingers curled into a fist. The next frames. They weren't in a hurry. Calmly, deliberately, they coated the door frame. Then they stepped back, surveyed their work. And then he raised a hand, pulled back his hood, and looked straight into the camera. Oh my God, I exhaled. Geronimo. Do you want to file a report? The building manager asked. I stared at the screen, feeling rage simmer beneath my skin. Geronimo. My brother. Had sealed my apartment door shut. Had he even considered what would happen if I had needed to get inside urgently? If there had been an emergency? Or had he simply wanted to humiliate me? I slowly stood up. Yes, I said. I do. By the time I got home, my phone was ringing non-stop. They didn't arrest him, I said, forcing down my irritation. They brought him in for questioning after I filed a complaint for property vandalism. Silence on the other end. But I could hear his breathing, heavy, short, like he was barely holding back his anger. You could have just talked to him, Beatrice, he finally exhaled. Handled this between yourselves. Oh, you're right, I said with a sharp laugh. I should have just called him up and asked, "Hey, Geronimo, were you, by any chance, the one who phoned my door shut so I couldn't get into my home?" Beatrice. And if he said no, I should have just taken his word for it. Is that it, Dad? I heard his sharp intake of breath. He's your brother. Yes, and that's exactly why I spent decades overlooking his laziness, his constant failures, his childish irresponsibility. But you know what? I'm done. You've started a family scandal, he exploded. Instead of handling this quietly, you ran to the police like your brother is some kind of criminal. And what is he if not a criminal, Dad? My voice was dangerously close to breaking. He deliberately damaged my door. This costs me money, time, and stress. This is vandalism. Vandalism, he shouted, and I could almost picture him throwing his hands up in his usual gesture of frustration. It was just a stupid prank. He wasn't thinking, he didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to. I cut in coldly. Did you even watch the security footage? Did you see how methodically he covered every inch of my door with foam? How carefully he made sure the lock was completely sealed? Silence. You have footage. Yes, I do. And that's exactly why he confessed, I said. So no, Dad, your son is not a victim. He knew exactly what he was doing. Beatrice, he could have gone to jail. He won't go to jail, I rolled my eyes. He'll get fined. Maybe probation. That's the absolute minimum for the crime he committed. Couldn't you have just let this go? His voice was different now, tired, pleading. For the sake of the family? I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Let it go. I repeated, fury rising in my chest. How about you let it go, Dad? Let go of the fact that I paid your mortgage for 4 years. Let go of the fact that I covered the bills, that I helped Ines and Geronimo every time they were struggling. Let go of the fact that I gave you $115,000 because I believed family meant taking care of each other. Don't exaggerate, he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm not exaggerating, I said, standing up and pacing the room. I did the math. $115,000. I could have bought a house with that money. Or invested it. Or simply not worked myself to death just to keep supporting all of you. We never forced you. No, you just used me for as long as I let you, I shot back, my hands shaking with rage. And the moment I said no, Geronimo decided to get revenge. He's just a kid. I scoffed. A kid? He's 24, Dad. At that age, I was working full-time, paying rent, and helping you. Where was your sympathy for me then? Silence again. You betrayed me, I continued, my voice now eerily calm. I gave you everything, and in return, you cut me out of the will and called me greedy. That's exactly right. And here's what I'll tell you, Dad. I'm not greedy. If I were greedy, I wouldn't have paid for your house all these years. But you know what I refuse to be? Stupid. I took a breath. And if you, Mom, Ines, or Geronimo ever interfere in my life again, I will take legal action against you. There was a sound on the other end. Maybe he was about to say something but thought better of it. Beatrice. Take care, Dad. I ended the call. The phone rang several more times throughout the evening. First Dad again. Then Mom. Then, to my surprise, Ines. I didn't pick up. The next morning, as I was checking my emails, I noticed a new notification from the bank. It had arrived at 3:42 a.m. Subject: Funds Transfer Request. I tapped on the email, my mouth going dry. A request for $5,000. Sender: Geronimo Marlowe. I stared at the screen, unable to believe my eyes. First, he tried to damage my apartment. And now, he had the audacity to ask me for money? I opened my Messenger app. A new message from Geronimo. Beatrice, I need money ASAP. I'm in trouble. I have to pay a fine, or it'll mess up my credit score. Since you made this happen, the least you can do is make sure I don't end up screwed over. You don't want to ruin my life, do you? I slowly, very slowly, set my phone down. And then I started laughing. He really never learned. I opened my banking app and declined the request. Then I blocked his number. This time, for good. It was strange to realize how much my life had changed in the past 6 months. A year ago, every step I took revolved around their needs. Every financial decision I made included not just my own expenses but their bills, their mortgage, their whims. Now I was living for myself. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city. No calls. No frantic messages begging me to help one more time. Aunt Agatha still called every now and then, but I knew she wasn't trying to guilt me. She simply wanted to understand, could I really be happy without my family? And was it true that it no longer hurt? She told me about what was happening on their side, but each time, I listened with less and less interest. Yes, my parents were working hard to make ends meet. Yes, the twins were still trying to find themselves. Yes, they still blamed me. But I didn't care anymore. I had let them go. Now, they were just facts, things that existed in the world but had no impact on me. I walked back to the living room, picked up my phone, and scrolled through my messages. A coworker had sent a link to a new restaurant that had just opened downtown. They say the cocktails are amazing. Wanna go? I smiled as I typed my response. Sounds great. How about Saturday? I closed the chat, set my phone aside, and picked up the book I had been meaning to start. I no longer had to worry about how much money was left in my account after sending off transfers to my family. I no longer felt obligated to spend my weekends visiting my parents just because it was the right thing to do. I could simply live. And that feeling of freedom was worth more than any inheritance.